Hi, I'm Ali. This is Grunge Kitchen. Welcome to episode 3, where we're going to be making a rhubarb crumble together. And the album that we're going to be listening to and talking about is Whole Live Through This. Now, if you know me in real life, you've probably tasted my rhubarb crumble. It's one that I've had a lot of good feedback on over the years. So I'm happy to share it with you today. It's such a simple and trusted recipe, easy to follow. Don't be daunted by it. And hopefully you'll enjoy it and have a delicious dessert to share with your friends. If you do enjoy this video, please subscribe. Use the subscribe button below the video on YouTube, and also look at the social media links that are going across the bottom of your screen now. You can like and follow us on any of those pages, and I'd really appreciate it if you shared this video too. If you're really enjoying it, that will help us. We've had an incredible response, especially on Instagram, over the last few weeks, which has been amazing. And thank you, everybody. I'm really enjoying this and enjoying the ability to share with you things that I enjoy. Anyway, I'm going to walk you through the ingredients now, and let's get on with this and make some rhubarb crumble together. Ingredients wise, what you're going to need is 2 bunches of rhubarb about this big. They're pretty large bunches. You can see they're kind of bigger than the dish that I'm going to put these in. The recipe actually calls for 900 grams of rhubarb, but I very rarely actually weigh it. I know by sight that if I get 2 big bunches like this, each bunch has got about 4 decent sticks in, that's going to be about the right amount. You basically just need to cover the base of your dish. And you can see I'm using a Pyrex dish. Any kind of shallow lasagna dish or baking dish like this will be fine. I'm also going to be using some unsalted butter. You could use salted, but really unsalted is better for this recipe. I'm using white plain flour, but you could use wholemeal flour. You'd need exactly the same amount, but it would just give you a slightly different texture and flavour on the crumble. You need a bit of baking powder because this is plain flour. Then we've got some caster sugar. That's actually to go on the rhubarb within the crumble rather than in the crumble topping. And in the crumble topping, we're going to use some demerara sugar, which is there. I'm also going to put a pinch of ginger spice in this rhubarb crumble. You can do that. You can also flavour it with cinnamon or other things if you like flavouring your rhubarb. And then over here I've just got a big bowl, which in a minute we're going to chop the rhubarb and put it in here. And there's my digital scales. And that's everything you need for this recipe. First off, what I'm going to do is just top and tail these rhubarb stalks. So you can't use really the bottom bit of the stalks, and you can't use the top where you've got this kind of knobbly bit. So I'm just going to take those off. Now, what we're actually going to do is use this, put these in a bowl, and then we're going to soak them. You can soak them for as long as you want, really, but a couple of hours is what you need. I'm just going to cut the rhubarb into chunks of about 1 inch. That's the size of the chunks there. It's fairly chunky, but the thing is they will break down. In the soaking they will lose some of the tartness, and they'll go a bit softer, and then when you bake them they actually go very palatable. So it doesn't matter that they're that big as chunks, because you won't notice when they're in the crumble later. The other benefit of soaking them for a few hours is that you don't need to wash them. You could give them a wash if they're really particularly dirty, but these have come out of a supermarket and they're not really that dirty at all. But soaking them for a few hours means that when you eventually tip that water out, you'll see all the bits of, tiny bits, not huge bits, of gunk that might have been on them will come off. Now you need to look out with rhubarb for stringy bits. These ones are very fresh, so there isn't much, but if you find any stringy bits on your rhubarb, just pull them off, because it's not nice when you eat it. So I'm going to put all this rhubarb in the bowl, and then I'm going to do the same with the other bunch. This is what I mean by the stringy bit that you can get on the rhubarb. So I've just been cutting this particular stalk, and there's a bit, can you see there's like a stringy piece of skin? So if you find any bits of stringy skin like that, the best thing you can do is just pull them entirely off. It just means that when you're eating the rhubarb, you're not going to have any nasty stringy bits that get caught between your teeth. It makes it a far more pleasant experience to eat the rhubarb. So all I've done is put the rhubarb in this big bowl and then fill it so that the water's just above where the rhubarb is. That's just tap water, doesn't need to be anything special. And then I'm just basically going to leave that to one side to soak for a few hours. You'll see that the rhubarb will start to splay at the ends, and that just means it's taken in some water, which is what we want it to do here. It just reduces the tartness of the rhubarb, so it's well worth doing. Okay, let's leave it and we'll come back to it a bit later. Okay, so while that rhubarb is soaking, I'm going to show you how to make the crumble. Don't be intimidated. You will get your hands in this, but it's so easy. My mum always said to me, if you've got cold hands, you're excellent for making pastry and crumble. But if you suffer from warm hands, my best tip for you would be to run your hands under cold water for a few minutes before you start this. And then you'll find that you don't have the mixture sticking to your hands as much, and you'll get a better result. So let's get this crumble on the road, ready to go on top of the rhubarb. Before starting, I've put my oven on 200 degrees Celsius, which is 400 degrees Fahrenheit. My oven's just a gas oven. It's not a fan oven. If you've got a fan oven, I'd suggest you maybe turn that down to about 180. But for my oven, I know I need it on 200 degrees. So that's preheating now while I make the crumble. So we're going to start with 225 grams of flour. And I'm just going to tip that in to the bowl there. And we're going to put in 2 teaspoons of baking powder. Seems like a lot, but you need it because it's plain flour. And then we've got 160 grams of the butter. Now you'll see I've cut it into small cubes. So that's one reason for doing that, is it makes it easier to weigh out the right amount, but also when you put it in with your flour, it's going to make it easier to rub it in. There's all my very sticky butter that I couldn't get out of the bowl in with the flour and ready to rub. Now this is the part where people tend to get intimidated, but you shouldn't. So I'm going to put the camera back up there so I can show you what happens here with both hands. Okay, now I've taken my rings off because they will get, if you've got jewellery on your hands, it will get messy and it'll get clogged up with the butter and the flour mixture. But basically all you're going to do is run your hands under cold water if you haven't already at this point, and then we're just going to literally rub the flour into the butter, and you just want to be pinching it together with your fingers and keep going. Takes a bit of time, but it's quite therapeutic. This is something I've been doing since I was very little, baking crumble in particular. It's a family favourite. Can't go wrong with a crumble, and it's very adaptable. Now what you'll find is that you start to get clumps of butter, but they start breaking down. And slowly but surely the flour is disappearing into the butter. You want to use room temperature butter if you can, because it just makes it a whole lot easier. My best trick for if you haven't left your butter out and it's hard and you've just got it out of the fridge but you want to do this, is to put the butter on a plate, tip a glass bowl upside down over the top of the plate, rinse the glass bowl with hot water out of the kettle so that the bowl is hot, or stick the bowl in the microwave for 10-15 seconds, and then stick the bowl upside down over the butter and just leave it for a few minutes, and you'll find that the butter will soften quickly. Now, I don't know whether you can see this, but we're starting to get to the point where this is resembling like a sandy consistency. It's not feeling like flour anymore, and the chunks of butter are getting smaller and smaller. A trick that my mom taught me when you're doing this kind of thing is to shake the bowl like that, and all the biggest bits of butter then come to the top, so you can work on those and keep rubbing them in. And it doesn't take all that long, and you'll have sandy consistency crumble. Doesn't really matter if there's big chunks of butter, because obviously when it's in the oven they'll melt into the rest of the crumble anyway. Okay, so we've got that down to sandy consistency breadcrumbs. Effectively, looks like breadcrumbs, and that's about the consistency you want. It just feels like damp sand in your hands. Okay, so I'm going to wash my hands, and then we're going to stir the demerara sugar through this, and then it's done. This is what you want your butter and flour to look like once it's blended. It's just like sand. Okay, so here's my demerara sugar, 160 grams of that, and all we're going to do is tip that straight into the rest of the crumble mix, and then we're just going to stir this around so that it's completely mixed together and blended. And that's your crumble topping that's going to go on top of your rhubarb very shortly. Keep blending till you make sure you've got no big lumps of sugar left. Okay, so I've put my drained rhubarb in this dish. You can see that it just covers the base of the dish. There's no gaps, it's kind of evenly spread. And then all we're going to do is I've got 50 grams of caster sugar here, and you're just going to basically shake the caster sugar so that it is evenly spread. It's quite a lot of caster sugar, but you will know that if you've had rhubarb before, that you need that sugar to sweeten the fruit. So I mean, this is not a diet dessert, and there is a fair amount of sugar in it. You could switch out, use palm sugar or coconut sugar or whatever kind of sugar you prefer. I've never tried it with sweetener, but it could work. But yep, and then I'm just going to add a bit of ginger. So this is just ground ginger here, and I'm just going to put some ground ginger. Ginger is really good with rhubarb, so I'm just going to add some in. And then we're going to tip our crumble onto the base, which I'm just going to put the camera back up so I can do that with two hands. So I'm just going to take this bowl of crumble, which you can see is what we mixed before, and you're just going to shake it all over this crumble. Make sure it's flattened out. It doesn't need to be precise. The crumble's not meant to be pretty, though it is a thing of beauty if you ask me. But you just want to basically ensure that most of the fruit, doesn't matter if there's a bit popping through the top, but you basically want an even spread of crumble over the top of that fruit. And there you have it. I'm going to pop that in the oven, and that's going to need about 25 to 30 minutes, and then it will be done. So, Hole lived through this. It's just such a formidable album from the mid-90s, and one that had a huge influence on me. It was amazing at that time to see a female-fronted grunge band making the impression that they did. This wasn't Hole's debut album, which was pretty on the inside, But this was a really defining moment, and partly because of when it landed. So it was released in 1994, very soon after what happened with Kurt Cobain. And of course, Courtney was very well known as his wife, and it was kind of it's played out in the spotlight what happened for them and their marriage, and the turbulence and the impact that they had on each other. And they were often compared to Sid and Nancy, a later day version of, because of the way that they seemed to be both a terrible influence on each other's drug taking and crazy behaviour, but also completely codependent on each other. And this album was incredible. It had some songs on there that stood the test of time for me. In particular, Doll Parts was, such a raw song, and sounded so authentic, with Courtney singing it. And Violet was huge. Miss World was huge. There were some really solid songs on this, and it was their breakthrough album. For many reasons. Also, it had some big names. Jay Mascis from Dinosaur Jr. was one of the mixers on this album. And of course, there were always rumours that it was ghostwritten or helped in some way by Kurt Cobain, though, as I understand it, everybody close to the band has denied that was the case. And I have to say, as a whole fan myself, I just kind of discount that, because that whole notion to me doesn't make sense, that Courtney in particular was assisted in the songwriting aspects, because if you look at what she did since, Celebrity Skin was absolutely ginormous and blew this album even out the water in terms of sales, and obviously he was not around to assist with that. So this album in particular for me was the first time that I was very aware of women fronted bands. There was like Bikini Kill and Le Tigre and loads of other amazing The Breeders bands that had women at the front. But back in the 90s was a different time to today, and they didn't kind of get as much exposure, and people forget, I think, that there were some absolutely formidable female fronted bands, and female band members of other bands. I mean, when you think about Darcy from Smashing Pumpkins, for instance, that were central to the movement and to what was going on at the time, but tend to get a bit overlooked. So yeah, if you haven't listened to this album, I really strongly suggest you go check it out. It sounds as good today as it did back then, and I really still enjoy it. It's still an album that I play, and I was very lucky, got to see them back when they were tiny in the 90s on their first tours of the UK, and then saw them through the Celebrity Skin years. I've seen them at festivals. I've been very lucky and seen them, I can't remember specifically how many times, but I'd guess about 5 or 6 times. Always really entertaining to watch, and of course Courtney Love continues to be quite a star on the circuit, have been known nowadays for acting, and their daughter Frances Bean, and all sorts of things. Very active on social media too. She's one of those people that I'd love to get the chance to have dinner with at some point. If I ever got to have a celebrity dinner party, she'd be at it. Anyway, enjoy this album. I think it's one of the better grunge albums, and one of the better female fronted albums from the era, and I hope you get something out of it. It goes delightfully well with the Rhubarb Crumble. Let me know your thoughts. So I just pulled this out of the oven. It's had 30 minutes. I don't know whether you can hear, but you can probably see that it's bubbling away under the surface there. And the top's gone a bit golden, and that means it's about ready to be enjoyed. So this is what your finished crumble looks like. This is a dish with just the crumble in, so you can see it, and then I've put some vanilla ice cream on top of that one, which is our favourite. It goes really well with vanilla ice cream in particular, but people like it with custard, and it goes really well, nice with cream or creme fraiche as well. But ice cream's my favourite. It's not the prettiest of desserts, as you can see, but it tastes absolutely delicious. So enjoy it, and please let us know your thoughts on this recipe.
Thank you for joining me on another episode of Grunge Kitchen. It's been a delight as always. Please do subscribe, hit the subscribe button, share this video, follow us on social media, give us ideas for what you might want to see, which albums you might want us to feature, and keep watching and sharing and giving feedback. It's been a real pleasure, and I'll hopefully see you next time on a future episode of Grunge Kitchen.